Danse, Nitutemtik, Wagumagantik, Wapamasquasis, Nitsikasan, Onyx Gabonin, Otania. I want to start by introducing myself in Cree, even though I don't speak the language, because it reminds me of who I am, where I come from, and the responsibilities I have to honoring, practicing, exercising my Nehio identity. I graduated from law school 2 years ago, and my presentation is about how we are going to use how we can use the international arena to advance some of this fight. And I was fortunate that in my last semester of law school, I purposely chose to study international law, to go to New York City, do an internship at the UN, because I knew that our people needed to understand how we utilize that system for these types of fights. Our people have been going to the UN since the 70s, and even before that, the early 1900s. But there was a strong movement for our people to go in the 70s because of this white paper. And one of the things that came out of that was our people utilizing that system to get reports done, to learn about how we use that system. And one of the key elements that came out of this type of advocacy was the Martinez report. And that report did a study on treaties. And I'm glad that I want to thank Sylvia and Pam for talking about treaties, especially Sylvia, because I don't have those teachings that she has to be able to talk about that spiritual significance that they hold. Because when our ancestors made treaty with our white brothers and sisters, they used our pipe, and that pipe is significant and sacred, and that's where we practice our sovereignty. And that's why we always bring out and lift our pipes when we talk about treaty, because of that significance and that sacredness that our ancestors knew when they were entering into these relationships and agreements. Okay. I'm just going to make a quick announcement, but before people leave, there's a petition to oppose all of these pieces of legislation. And Jason Zorthian is at the back with it, so please stop by before you leave. So I want to highlight some of the important things that came out of this Martinez report, because for the past many years, 40 years, whatever, since the white paper, we've been struggling to advance the strength. We've been struggling with trying to tell Canada the strength and importance of how strong our treaties are. And the international community recognized the strength of them. And this is what they said. I'm going to read this because you need to hear this. The domestic viewpoint, so Canada's understanding of how they see our treaties and our treaty relationship, is this. They assert that the treaties involving Indigenous peoples are basically a domestic issue to be construed, eventually implemented and adjudicated via existing internal mechanisms such as the courts and federal authorities. That's not how we understand the treaty relationship. That's not how our ancestors understood that treaty relationship. It was a nation-to-nation agreement. We never made treaty with Canada, we made treaty with the Crown. Our understanding is this: Indigenous parties to treaties whose own traditions on treaty provisions and treaty making continue to uphold the international standing of such instruments. Our treaties are internationally recognized agreements. They were treaties of peace and friendship. They were never meant to surrender, cede, or yield up our lands like Canada thinks it is. So, our people have utilized some of these different UN bodies to advocate for the international community to hear us, because Canada doesn't listen and doesn't want to hear us. And these are some of the places that our people have gone. I'm not going to read them, you can see them on the screen. Next slide. This is really important, this CERD report. CERD is the acronym for the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. I attended a national treaty gathering in Lloydminster about a month ago, and this was brought to my attention. And I don't know how many people know about this, but you have to know about this. CERD reports to the General Assembly, and they provide a report on all of the states that are a part of the General Assembly on what is happening in their states about racism and discrimination. Next slide. At this meeting, I need to back up and acknowledge at the meeting that I attended, it was Chief Wallace Fox that, he was one of the chiefs that attended this meeting, and he brought this to our attention, and I need to acknowledge that, and I approached him with proper protocol to ask if I could speak about this, and he gave me that permission, because this is important that we know. Anyway, CERD reported about what Canada reported to CERD about some of the issues that they address in Canada about racism and discrimination. And Indigenous peoples was one of those things. And at that time, Canada was making this presentation about how much money they provide to us, how much money they give us, they support us. And one of the vice chair, his name is Dr. Amir, he asked Chief Fox, "Is that true?" And Chief Fox said, "No, it's not." And then, next slide. So then Chief Fox directed Dr. Amir to ask Canada this question: what proof does Canada have to say they have legal title to the land of First Nations people? And Canada didn't answer. They still haven't answered. They've been given, after a question is asked to them in those meetings, they have 3 or 4 months to be able to come up with an answer or report. They still haven't answered. Next slide. So as a result of that, Chief Fox invited Dr. Amir to come visit Canada, to come to Onion Lake and for him to see for himself the conditions and the situation of what the relationship is here and what the conditions of our reserves are. And he came and he saw for himself. And at that time, he asked, next slide, he asked Canada to meet with him. He asked the federal government, and they refused. So now he's in that place right now where he is drafting a report about what he's seen here. I don't think the report is out yet, but it's in the works. I'm running through this really quickly because we don't have much time, but I just wanted to bring to your attention the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which was ratified, adopted by the General Assembly in 2007, and Canada only adopted this in 2010. A part of what is contained within the UN Declaration is elements that speak to treaties and legislation, and that's found in Article 19 and Article 37. Next slide. And I'm just going to read this quickly. Article 19, states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. This is not happening right now. Canada is not abiding by the UN Declaration and what is in there. That's why it's so important for us to use that instrument, to use the international community to advance this struggle. We have to hold them accountable to that. They adopted that, they signed on to that. We have to hold them accountable. We have to start writing, not only writing letters, going there and telling them what they are not doing. And just quickly, free, prior, and informed consent. Next slide. This is, when we talk about consultation, this is what consultation is. And you can see, I think you can see that on the slide, but I'm going to run through this really quickly. Consultation isn't what Dr. Pound talked about, creating these bills, fast-tracking them through Parliament, and now we're at the state where we're like, a majority of our people don't even know what's going on, and we're in this crisis mode. Consultation constitutes what is found within this, the elements of free, prior, and informed consent, and that has not been met, and that is not being done right now. Next slide. So, where do we go from here? I'm glad that woman, I don't know what her name, I'm glad that she was talking about how do we exercise our sovereignty. Our ancestors have been doing that since time immemorial. We don't need Canada to tell us that we're nations and that we exercise our sovereignty. We have been doing that. We have been doing that since time immemorial. And every time our elders are in a meeting and we have pipes there, that is the most fundamental practice of exercising our sovereignty. When I was driving here, I was a little bit emotional because I thought I was thinking about how all of this legislation affects us. And I thought, I go out on the land every year to fast. I've been doing that for 10 years. And I thought to myself, if I cannot go out on the land anymore to do that,